.env is a library that lets you easily store environmental configuration variables in a file that is not watched by Git. There are two reasons you might want to use .env. The first is in order to provide a clean separation between the configurations of different environments. For example, let's say you have an image field, which is stored on S3. The article title is Cutest Thing Ever, and the photo is of a cute puppy. That has a S3 key, which is determined by the ID of the post. So that puppy photo is uploaded to S3 under post images 3. Then, later, you're working locally. You create an article called The ISIS Menace, also post 3 on your local host. And then you upload a photo that is appropriate for that article. Then it gets saved to post images 3 and propagated to your website. And now you have a public relations disaster, all because you didn't properly separate the configuration of different environments. The second reason to use .env is to keep your secret keys a secret, safe from people like this guy, who, if you zoom in on his computer screen, you can see that he's looking at my open source GitHub repository. I almost pushed my secret AWS key this weekend before being saved by .env. So, those are the two reasons we want to use .env, to have a clean separation of config by environment, and to keep our keys secret. How do we make this a reality? Well, one way is to use ember-cli-dotenv. This will work for most of our needs. At the end of the episode, I'll show another way of installing it that you can fall back on. So first we install ember-cli-dotenv with npm. Then we make our default .env file. The format is the key name, then an equal sign, then the value. The value can be in quotes or not, and there are some values that do need to be in quotes. New line, and then repeat. We can set this to be ignored in our gitignore, so none of your secrets will be given away, even if your code is open source. You also won't mess up other developers' development workflow with your own environmental quirks. So to get those variables into our app, we'll use the process.env variable in config/environment.js. Process.env is a node variable, so it won't be available in our front-end files, just environment.js and other config files. As you can see when we log it out, it contains lots of system variables and our .env variables. We can use those to set variables in our Ember environment. If these are variables that we'll be wanting to use in our front-end code, we'll have one last step to do before we can use them. In our broc file, we set the .env configuration hash, then set the client allowed keys array. That way you can store both secret and non-secret variables in your .env file, and only send the non-secret ones to the front end. If you send the secret ones, then this guy will come back. And now he's got the Chrome inspector. To use the non-secret config variables in our Ember app, we import env and then access it from there. That's how .env works with one environment, and it's almost as easy to make it work with multiple environments. The first step is to create another .env file. For example, .env.staging. Then you go to the broc file and set up variable paths, and that's all there is to it. If you want to use the variables in the staging file, just make sure your app is run with the staging environment. Okay, so that should work for most of your purposes, but sometimes there can be trouble when you're trying to use stuff outside of Ember proper. For example, I had a deploy.js config file where importing was a syntax error, and which loaded before the .env variables were added to process.env. For those situations, you can fall back on the regular .env library. This can be installed with npm. It uses the same .env files as we've been using, but now in our deploy.js config file, we can require and load it at the top of the file. Then our variables will show up in the process.env. just like ember-cli-dotenv does automatically in environment.js. So that's how you use .env. You can use it for separating your development and production environments, separating the dev environments of different developers, and for keeping your secrets safe. You can use ember-cli-dotenv for most of your needs, and the regular .env library for the rest. Best of luck, and I'll see you in the Pro episode, where we use the drag enter and drag leave events to make our drag and drop file upload nicer.